Good evening, subscribers. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? I know I've talked about a lot of different cryptids and a lot about Bigfoot and Dogman and a lot of the other strange, unexplainable things people have seen in the woods. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. But it's been a long time coming that we talk about the Yeti. And there's some misconceptions and some things I've learned over the years. And some very interesting things. First off, one thing that amazed me is I get emails from people all around the world since I've started this Bigfoot channel. Talked to people in my travels around the U.S., met lots of foreign visitors. And in North America, if you say Bigfoot, people know what you mean. But if you're talking to somebody who's Chinese or from India or from South Africa or even Australia, where they have their Yowie, and most regions have their version of Bigfoot. You say Bigfoot or Sasquatch, maybe they've heard of it, maybe they haven't. But internationally, if you say Yeti, that really tends to stick with people. They tend to know exactly what you're talking about. So I would almost argue that the term Yeti or phrase Yeti or whatever you want to call it, name Yeti, for a Bigfoot-like hairy hominid creature that roams Central Asia, all going up through Russia and all those areas, Yeti seems to be a lot more of a universal term. And I thought that was kind of fascinating. So a couple of things I wanted to get out of the way when we talk about the Yeti and this subspecies of the international Bigfoot phenomenon, I guess you'd call it, is when you think of the Yeti, you think of Mount Everest, you think of snow, you think of barren peaks and freezing cold and some ice wintry cave, maybe like the Star Wars Wampa creature, some kind of like remote isolated creature, some big hairy abominable snowman type thing. That always kind of comes to mind with the Yeti. But realistically, if you look at the reports and how they're described, they're a lot more of like what we think of like a patty Bigfoot. They're not usually described as white. I mean, sometimes they are, but they're typically described as being brown or black, like a North American Bigfoot. And also, while they probably do cross over kind of those open, barren areas of snow from time to time, they're probably going to spend most of their time in the valleys and lower down and in the tree line where there's actual things to eat, where they can find prey and they can find food and grasses and roots and all the other stuff that they would eat. Because there's really nothing else going on those high sloped peaks up there. I mean, maybe they might find, a bird's nest or something like that, but realistically, they're going to be down below, and they probably cross over the mountains when they're trying to get to, another valley or another home range. Large animals and people, even wild people, tend to have very large ranges where they go find things. So the Yeti is really no different. So the misconception of them being these very high alpine snowmen and being all white with gnarly teeth, if you look at the real reports of what they are, they tend to be a lot more like a patty Bigfoot. So when we think of the geography of the Yeti, the very classic term from the Nepalese people, from the Sherpas, from the people, from bordering from China and Pakistan and India, all through the Himalayas, the largest mountain range in the world. The term Yeti really kind of originates from there. And but like I said, internationally, Yeti is really kind of known as like a pseudonym for Bigfoot, so to speak, because there's so many different names. But if you go into China, deeper into China, you'll find the Yeren, which seems to be their version of a Bigfoot, a large, hairy, ape-like creature, somewhere between a man and an ape. If you go north into Russia, they have the Almast or the Almasty, which they seem to have a few things going on there. Some describe them as a Neanderthal-type Bigfoot creature, and some describe them as more of a regular Bigfoot creature. And, you look all around in other parts of the world, and they all have their versions of Bigfoot. But that seems to be primarily what we're talking about with the Yeti, is really when we think about Nepal, we think about the Himalayan mountain range. So much like everything else in the Bigfoot phenomenon, the Yeti is really no different, especially in very barren landscapes where very few people go. You tend to get a lot of, prints. That's where the name Bigfoot came from, was from the large tracks they left behind. And the Yeti, what's really fascinating is the local people, especially in Nepal and all through there, they all talk like it's a regular creature. They all talk about deer, they talk about bears, and they talk about the Yeti. And it's very similar to what Native Americans and a lot of other people think when you talk about Bigfoot over here. Now, here's the famous Shackleton track, I believe, from one of his very first expeditions. Some people think it was a bear. Some people think it's a snow leopard track that melted. But, it very well could be a Yeti track. I know Josh Gates, 10 years ago now, had an expedition, and he found it could be a track of a Yeti. And I think it's like everywhere else on this planet. If there's trees and animals and secludedness, people see these things from time to time, and I think that's no different. Being the largest mountain range on Earth, I think there's probably plenty of Yeti or Bigfoot creatures there. And despite the sparse evidence, it's also quite interesting that in a lot of cultures, especially with the Nepalese people, they have their relics. This was supposed to be the skull cap of a Yeti. I think they took some hair and found it to be the shoulder muscle, the top of a yak, and then the hand there was some kind of a monkey or something like that, not native to the area. But, it is, they do believe it's a real creature, and like everything to them, it's sacred. And so it's quite fascinating. And also it came up on the news, I think it was last year, where, the term Yeti has been translated, to be a bear, and there's 16 different translations or something. Don't quote me on 16. There's supposed to be a bunch of different translations for Yeti, and it all comes across as meaning bear, except for one. And there was one translation where it actually came across being this gigantic creature that walks upright and covered in hair, not a bear, so to speak. But it was all over the news of, Yeti's a bear. It got proved. That was the headline. It's very frustrating because it's like, well, it didn't prove anything. It just says that they have a word Yeti being translated as bear some ways. Anyway, so I find all that very fascinating, that it's in their culture. We see that just like in North America with our Native Americans here. That it's just, another creature that seems to be part of the ecosystem. And, the depiction of it being a white creature, there are reports like this infamous photo here of the white Bigfoot in the middle of the night. There are reports of white and light gray or dark gray, all sorts of color forms of Bigfoots out there, either it being with age that they turn white, or maybe more like a blonde that gets sun bleached, or maybe some kind of albinoism, or maybe not true albinoism, something in between. Who knows? And I think maybe in some polar regions, it might make sense through whatever means of creation or evolution, whatever you believe in. Just like a polar bear is white, they have black skin and white fur, but it helps them blend in more. And I think that would, I don't put that past a Bigfoot-like creature that spends most of its time in the snow. Maybe it does spend time in the bushes and the trees, but maybe there are some populations of them that are white or gray, and then there are other populations that do look a lot more brownish black like we get with our Bigfoots. Anyway, the Yeti is one of those long, interesting things, especially when, white explorers first started to climb Mount Everest and talk to Sherpas, the people helping them out, and they heard all these stories. It's all really quite fascinating to me. And I don't know, I think it's such a remote area. There's so much vast land. I mean, it's like, all of the Rocky Mountains look tiny compared to the Himalayan mountain range. It's just so many tens of thousands of miles, that maybe been flown over once, but there's so many valleys, there's so many areas, who knows what's there. So I think it's really quite possible the Yeti, and then going all through northern India and then parts of China and Russia and all the other adjoining countries that are in that area. It's, I would be surprised if there wasn't one there. Considering North America and Canada and all our wooded areas, and then, the more drier areas of Australia and even South America, and, every continent, every area seems to have its version of Bigfoot. And I think Yeti really is kind of, it's one of the oldest myths. It's fascinating, and I think it's really worth for you guys to take a look at. So if you like what you see here, please hit the subscribe button. Please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. Thank you very much. Oh, hey, I almost forgot. You can go to Twitter and follow me at RealMattSquatch. It's where I post when new videos come out, because the notification system for YouTube isn't always that great. Also, links to shows and things that I'm a guest on occasionally, and other things that I find funny. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram as well, although the account's private and I'll have to add you. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Just search Matt Squatch Presents or at Matt Squatch. Thank you very much.